Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome here at one hand in the offices of Bruges in Novado van den Broele, and also a warm welcome to the people online. I've seen they are coming from several countries all over the world, so thank you for that, for coming and listening to us. We are the hosts for today. So Nicolas and myself, we are business analysts here at Van den Broele. And we have also our speaker that will talk, Damien Braakman, who will talk us to agile business cases. But first of all, we want to tell a little bit about Van den Broele, so then you know what we're doing over here.
Yes, hello from me too as well. These are some topics we will address very briefly, so don't worry about the topics. So first of all, fly the why. Why are we doing the things we are doing? At Van den Broele, we work for governments, both local and central governments. And we have two whys. First of all, we want to reduce time through digital transformation. As you may know, governments come from a long way with a lot of paper, and we are helping them in the transformation to the digital world. And secondly, we have a lot of networks and a lot of experts that we know, and we combine the expertise of all those people in platforms and in learning platforms. And that's our second why. We want to optimize the time of the people of working at the local governments and other governments to optimize their time through sharing of this knowledge. So what are we dreaming of? Our ultimate goal is to have a government that is as customer centric as we are as a company, or we want to be as a company. We are founded in 1957, and I think that's one of the main principles we try to achieve, is being very customer centric, and that's why we want this for the government as well.
So Nicolas already told you, we have been starting at 1957. This is a company that has been started with Jacques van den Broele, so also his name is within the company name Van den Broele. And throughout those years to 2023, we are about 107 employees, so we have been growing enormously and still are, so to do a lot of work for all those governments. And what we want to do, of course, we want to provide access to innovative expertise and tools. And how do we want to do that? Because we are giving training, so physical and online training. We are providing software for our customers. So, for instance, maybe people know eLocket. So this is a product that citizens does not have to go to the municipality house, but they can, behind their computer, act for specific documents from the government, so the birth certificate and so on. And we have also books and magazines that we're still providing.
Then a little word about our products. So we have 5 strategic lines. First of all, the transactional workflows. We have a do-it-yourself solution, and we have some other solutions. And maybe the Flemish people know Mijn Verbouwpremie, where you can obtain money from the government if you are doing a renovation. So the entire workflow and process is done in our company as well. So that's one of our main products. We have a product on e-signing as well. We have a very big product on content and learning. As I was saying, we have a lot of expertise, and we have a lot of experts in our network, and we're combining this into some platforms, knowledge platforms, and people of governments can consult those platforms to get information for their day-to-day job to help them. We have also a solution to manage grants, subsidies. And fifth, we have niche solutions, for instance, in the religious way of environment, some accountancy software we have there, and some other products.
Just to give an idea of an impact of e-sign flow, one of our products today is that we have this year or past year 1,800,000 of signings, digital signings that have been made. So we have about 12,000, more than 12,000 users. And we have several integrations with other software products as well. So a lot of people are using this platform.
Very briefly, we've been awarded by several instances, and for us, that's a sign that we are on the good way to do to follow our dream and to do our job. So it's very nice to get this recognition, and for us, it's another driver to go for our goal.
And here you see some partners that we are working with. So we do have them to help us together to deliver software, to have the expertise and so on.
Yes, and we close with a little commercial. So we have to do it from our HR department. So we are always looking for very great people. So if you're a developer or an analyst, we have several listings there. You can always visit our website or talk to Laura, who's present here, and she'll guide you through the process of how to join us on our road to our dream. So this was very briefly about our company, Van den Broele. Now we have the honor to introduce Damien Brackman, who's going to talk to you about agile business cases. Damien, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It is here. Thank you very much. So hello, everybody. My name is Damien, or Damien for the online people. Internationally, it's Damien. It's more cool than Damien. It's very difficult for Dutch people to say. I always hear Damien or Pater Damien, Toustan. So please just call me Damien. That's very fine. Instead of introducing myself in a regular way, I would like to know maybe one or two questions, maybe one online, one here. What do you need to know about me to be able to listen to me for about an hour? One question here, maybe one question online, Philip, if someone pops a question. So what do you need to know from me? What do you want to know from me? No questions are fine as well.
What is your background?
What kind of background? Work background or life background or hobbies?
Work and life.
Work and life. That's a big answer. Okay. Short answer maybe is I've been helping organizations with a lot of agile methods, transitioning into bigger or helping them with their growth. I helped a lot of startups, a lot of scale-ups, and in a lot of different sectors. So for the last year, I've been in a law firm, so it's very different, but all the same patterns and all the same organization tools and things I will talk about today can be used in any sector. So that's very interesting for me.
If there is no on-site question, there was one uploaded question online.
There was one, maybe?
Yes, I would ask you, what is your accomplishments where you are the most proud?
Oh, nice one. I worked for an IT consulting firm a few years ago, I think about 7 or 8 years ago, where I built an entire team around Agile consulting. And all the people that we work together there are still my friends, and I still work with them regularly. And that's really something I value a lot, because it's really like a gang, and we like to go to conference together and do things like that. So that's, I think, a very nice accomplishment for me. Thank you for the question. One more, sure. My last holiday was in Italy with my family, I didn't plan anything, and yes, I planned the planes and the first hotels, and for the rest it was go with the flow, which is not that easy with kids sometimes, but it's interesting. Okay, no more questions there, or maybe later. Ooh. Well, I'm a musician, so it's a question I will not answer because I love both of them. If I really, really have to, I would go with the Rolling Stones. Rock and roll. All right, I have a little story for you guys. It's called The Budgeting Saga. And I want to bring the cast to you. Today we have Luc Lumière. Luc Lumière, he's here. He's a business guy. He has an ID. We will go through his ID through the entire story. So Luc is here. We have Paul. Paul is the product owner. He's the Agile guy. I will talk very black and white today. So I will really go from one extreme to another, but bear with me for that. We have Marie. Marie is the manager of the firm. We have Agnes, who represents the entire Agile team. Okay, so Agnes is not a person, it's a team. We have Carl. Carl is our customer. We have Yuma, the UX expert. Yes. And then we have Eve or Eva, which is an external expert that we can probably use somewhere. So my first question to you guys is, who do you relate to? I would like to know who's in my audience. If you need to pick one character, who would you be? Maybe it's not entirely your role, but maybe the closest one then. And maybe for the people online, they could put in a chat which character they relate to the most. So who would be Luc Lumière here? Maybe hands up. Business people with a lot of ideas, creative people, chasing after budgets and projects. Okay. All right, we have Luc, some Lucs. Do we have Agile product owners? Product owners or not Agile product owners? Yes. Maybe online as well. Okay. Managers. How many managers? 1, 2, 3. You can show your hands. You can be proud. You're a manager. It's fine. Okay. Agnes, people in Agile teams, developers, testers, 2 online. Okay, beautiful. Some customers. No customers. No. Okay. End users, maybe. Yeah. Okay. UX. We have 2 UX people. Do we have UX people online? Not really. And then maybe external experts like consultants or 1, 2. Okay, great. So I know who I have in my audience today. That's beautiful. So let's start. Yes, I don't have any quotes of Steve Jobs in my presentation. Just so you know. So Luc has an idea. Yeah. He thought a lot about his idea, and he thinks it's really valuable. So he spent the weekend digging in Google. It doesn't exist. He looked around and he says, okay, I need to bring my idea to Marie. Because Marie is the manager. She will decide if we can do something with this idea or not. So he goes to Marie, and Marie says, I love the idea. It's great. Let's do something about it. Yeah. So what does Marie ask to Luc? No, Marie has the money. No? Yes, that's one question, but what's the first thing a manager asks? Is for a business case. Of course, let's do a business case. So Marie says, I have a nice template. It's on SharePoint. You can go download it and you can use it. And in my template, I need this. I need a description of the idea. I need a few possible solutions. I need risks and assumptions, a whole list, probably a log or something. I need a planning with baselines and things like that, dependencies. I need cost estimations, of course, how much will it cost? And I need the return on investment calculation. So Luc says, okay, I think I need help because, all right, the description of the idea, that's not a problem. I know my idea. I can write this down. Possible solutions, no clue. Risk and assumptions, I don't know. Planning, God knows. Cost estimations, how would I know that? And return on investment, what is return on investment? I don't know that. So I need help I need someone to help me with this. So Luc goes to Paul. Remember Paul, the product owner? But Paul, he's the agile guy. So dun, dun, dun. What happens with Paul? Paul says, well, the description, that's fine. This is very interesting. We need it, of course. Possible solutions, we cannot know. Risk and assumptions, we will handle this later. Planning, we don't know. In Agile, we don't need planning, of course. Yeah. Cost estimations, we don't do that. Return on investment, we don't calculate it. So Luc, he knows that with those kind of answers, he will not probably get Marie to approve his ID. So that's a problem. So he goes to SharePoint. He goes back to the old lessons learned document of every project we ever did in our company. Everybody has this? Yes. Everybody use it? No. So he goes to the documents and he goes to the descriptions of some project. He goes through the possible solutions, to risk and assumptions, plannings with 23 baselines, and he tries to do something with all those documents. And he writes a business case. So he makes a plan and it goes like this. It's a big IT black box. Something happens during 2 years. And then we have two possible solutions, plan A, plan B. Of course, there's a lot of risk at the end because we don't really know what's happening here. Luc has a plan. It's a bit fishy. So he goes to Paul and asks for help. How do you do it? How do you convince Marie if you want to start up a project? So Paul explains that for him, business cases are a bit difficult because we're talking about big budgets, big risks. Planning is really difficult. And the return on investment is really slow most of the time. If you want to implement a big project, it's slow. And we're not even sure that we built the right thing at the right time. So that's probably a common problem. So Paul says, no business cases, but we use something else. We want to start with something very small, like a prototype. We want to start with something that we can measure and that we can prove the value very fast. So we want to start with small budgets, the smaller the better, small risks, a very transparent planning, a very fast return, and we want to build exactly what we want to need and maybe what we want to need to know. That's the aim of a prototype, is to check something, to check a validity or to check the value of something. Yeah? So Paul, he says, I want to build something in 1 week that is very small but very interesting. And this small piece of value, this is something I can use to discuss with Marie. Yeah? So a prototype against a business case, it's not really the same thing, but it's another start. So let me bring you this start and this part of the story. So what does Paul do? We have Paul, we have Carl, we have Yuma, and we have Agnes, the Agile team. They come together, they start together. And to build a prototype, we want to find something to reduce the risks and reduce the assumptions, because that is, of course, the thing that is most hazardous in a project. So we have some techniques that we use to build a prototype and to start up a project in Agile tools or the Agile world. The first one is an impact mapping. I'm not going to explain the tools. You can look up the tools. They're really well described on the impact mapping org site and things like that. But the impact mapping is used to start up an idea and to go very, very wide, to check all the possible things and solutions that we might want to build someday. It's really a brainstorm tool that we can use to go very, very wide and to open up our ideas about the initial plan. Secondly, we use a user story map. The user story mapping is something that we use to prioritize and to check what we need to validate. The user story map is another technique. Instead of building something from A to Z, we will pinpoint with the user story map what is exactly what we need to check, what is worthwhile in the story map to be used or to be developed in the prototype. So it's really to pinpoint those risky points and those difficult points coming from the impact mapping. And the other one, or the last one, is the transparent planning that we use in a backlog. Everybody knows backlogs, but I will talk a little bit later about backlog prioritization. So those things are used for building this prototype. And I've been doing this for years, and I've seen prototypes being built in 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, but not more than that. You should not go further into your prototype than 2 weeks of effort. You already have a team here, so you pick 4 or 5 people, and they work for 1 week or 2 weeks on something that is very valuable, small, but something that you need to check and to validate. And that's your prototype. I always ask how much time business analysts take to write a business case. I don't know if someone has an idea, maybe your last business case, how much time, how much effort did it take? I don't know, who did write a business case lately?
2 months.
2 months, full time, one person, 2 months full time. Okay, so if you see the difference, mostly it's around 1 month, 1 month and a half, maybe one person or 2 persons working together, and it's just text, right? You wrote just text. It's a Word document mostly. So if you see the difference between this that you can do in 1 week and you can have something delivered, really built, against a text document for 1 month, I think it's interesting to maybe try it or have a go for your next project with something like that. If you need help with those tools, Philip will be your servant. He's a really good guide for that. So look, he's intrigued, but of course he's not convinced, right? So you handle a little bit of risk and a little bit of assumptions at the beginning of your project or prototype. How do you handle this during your implementation? Because you start with something, but how do you handle this later? So Agnes explains a little bit how you prioritize a backlog. Once you have your list of features that you know that you want to build, right? How do you prioritize this? Actually, we're not building from A to Z something, like we build a website, we will build the first page, then the second page, and the third page. We don't do that. Here, in this case, we want to build something that is first valuable, and secondly, the most risky features. We want to test if we're able to build the most difficult things first. Because if you start building the easy parts first, then you already burning budget and you don't validate anything, you don't test anything. Yeah. If you start building the risky things first, then you can really validate and say, okay, we have a case here. We can learn and we can do something with this. After that, you use effort and learnings. That's really important as well. If you know everything that is to be built in the backlog, then you're not learning anything. So put up the features higher where you can learn or where your team can learn. So first, the risky things before spending too much budget on the easy things, the easy part. And then, of course, but this is really common, after each iteration in our project, we ask for feedback. We go to Carl. Carl is our customer. He will tell us if what he sees is something that he will use. That's the only question we need to ask him. Is this something that you can use? Is this valuable at this point in time for you? If he says yes, we can continue. So we narrow down the assumptions along the way. All the assumptions that are written in a business case, we don't need them here. We just want the assumptions of the things that we build during this first week. We want to check this with Carl. Is this something you can use? Yes or no, and why not? That's the question we want to ask. That means that every time that we bring value, for example, if you have 4-week iterations during a project, or 2 weeks, doesn't matter. Every time that you build something and you put something on top of the first iteration or the previous iteration, your risk is going down. Your risk and your assumptions are going down because every time we validate with the customer or with Carl in our case. Yeah. So we really see during those kind of implementations with iterative development, that the risks of building something that the customer doesn't need goes down, 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 down. Every time we put something, a feature on top of it. Do you have any idea how much updates you get on your phone, on the apps on your phone per week, for example? How much? Too many, yeah. I think in the maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we used to do this manually. Remember that? We had to accept updates. Nobody does it anymore. It's all automatically. It's all automatic. So this is what they're doing. They're building features, small features that put it on top of the iterative development, and the risks are going down because we know our customers, we get the feedback, and we know it's valuable. Yes.
I have an online question. Would you call the result of this effort prototype or concept minimum viable product? Pretty zero?
That's your question.
No? Okay.
I know. I will not debate the term tonight because there is a lot of fuzz around it. I would just say that you need to, for your proof of concept with your manager, to be able to start a project, you need something small and valuable. If you call it an MVP, then people will say, well, it's that and that. So I don't, and I think Philip can probably answer this question much better than I can. And maybe you even have a talk about it, right? Yes. So Philip will answer that question. Maybe after the presentation, you can join me for the Q&A, and we will talk about that. It doesn't matter for the presentation here. If you call it an MVP or a prototype, or it's just a small piece, a small valuable piece that you need to convince a manager to go through. Okay, I hope this answer will satisfy Fabricio, was it? So Luc, he goes to Agnes and he has more questions for the team. During implementation, he's thinking a little bit, so what happens? How do you handle the planning, and how do you handle deadlines if you're in an implementation like this with this moving backlog? So Agnes says, well, actually that's really easy because by prioritizing the features that we got from our impact mapping and our story mapping, so all those post-its that you saw, those are all the features we want to build. By prioritizing them just in the backlog, we have a transparent planning. We know exactly what we can deliver during an iteration. Of course, the first iteration, it's a bit of a guess, the second one as well. But then the third and the fourth and the fifth iteration, you know exactly how many features, how many value you can deliver with each iteration. So whenever a deadline comes in, you know that if something needs to be delivered within 6 weeks, or some maybe dependency or something like that, you know exactly where to put it in the backlog. So this is really transparent. You can put this on a big board and say, okay, if we need this in 6 weeks, we need to put this here because we will not deliver it in the first, but we can put this in the second iteration. So it's quite flexible and it's quite easy. Of course, you need to reshuffle the features, the other features that are maybe in the second iteration because you cannot build more with the team you have. Yeah. So Luc wonders, how will I ever estimate my project with this moving backlog? Because Marie, she needs to know how much it will cost, right? So can you answer this question? How much will my project cost with an estimation or with a moving backlog or whatever with those iterations? So Paul comes back and Paul says, well, actually, this is not the right question to ask because we don't know the idea yet. We don't know the project yet. And we've heard in the waterfall world that all estimations were always wrong. So maybe that's not the right question. So what is the right question? The right question is, how many times do you want to invest? How many times are you ready to invest in the next iteration? That's the right question, because you know you have a team. You know how much your team costs. So that's your budget per iteration. This is very clear. You know how much your team costs and how much the iteration costs. So the question to Marie is, how many times are you willing to invest in a feature or in the next iteration? So remember, we started with a prototype, something very small, something very interesting. And we asked Marie, is it okay for you? Is the value of this prototype okay? Is the return of this prototype okay for you to go on? right? Are you willing to invest more in this idea? This is the question we ask her. And this is for the first iteration, for the, let's call it prototype for now. So Marie says, yes, it's interesting, the idea, I like it. I like the return of the prototype, and I want to invest. So she starts, or they start developing. And at the end of each iteration, those are the questions we need to ask Marie. Do you acknowledge the value of the iteration? So she will be joining the demos and the meetings to see what happened. We invested in the previous feature. Is the foreseen return, is it still okay for you? And is the next feature we want to build in the backlog, is this something you agree to invest in? Those are the three questions she needs to answer, that's it. And then we can continue. So as long as the value is bigger than the investment, Marie will be happy. She will say, yeah, it's interesting for us, or for our customers. I see potential, I want to continue. Yeah. So when you see your deliverables here, at every time we have a validation with our customers, we know that the risks and the assumptions are going down. This is what I explained just a few slides before. But now we see that the costs are going up. So Marie starts to invest in something, but she invests in value, and she sees that every time something more comes up into the project, and it's going up and up. So at a certain point of time, of course, the costs will be high, and we will have to check if the value is still worth the cost. But for now, she's super happy, she's in control. Yeah. So this is what is expected from management. Mostly, we see that management are deciding on projects or programs. So they are talking about big budgets, big risks, long time planning, scoping, and very big returns. But what we want to achieve is that or Marie or someone in the team has the mandate to be able to decide on smaller budgets, smaller risks, smaller risk, good planning, and a good scope. Why do we know that it's a good scope? Because we're building things that Carl is telling us that he will need and he will use. Yeah? So we need the decision points to go down. We need the lower decision points into our organizations. That's very, very important. So Marie is also able to tell to stop projects. This is, I don't know if anybody already had a project where something was stopped in the middle of development or in the middle of the project. Maybe someone? Yes. Was there something already delivered? 3 sprints. Yeah.
They were interested, so that was good. But at that time, they didn't have any more budget allocated.
Yeah. So
they're planning on working, but they did stop.
Yeah. So the reason was that the budget was not sufficient to go on, so they decided to stop the investment at the end of the 3rd iteration, right? So the balance here was that the cost was too high, and that the value was probably insufficient to invest more or something. So that is exactly the point. Every time we have an iteration, that's exactly the point where Marie or someone can decide if the value is still high enough to go further in the investment. So every iteration is that point that we need to ask ourselves, are we still doing something that is valuable for the cost that we are bringing into? Yeah. So every time Marie can say, okay, we stop here. So even if the value is going down and the cost is going up, you can still finish something if you're ready to invest in it. But it needs to be a clear decision where Marie can say we can stop. We have a question there, yes?
Yes, is it also not a risk when you keep reevaluating, so you keep adding on the cost, that you kind of get sucked in, even though if the value dips, but not enough, even though it would be a good decision to stop there, but because you already invested a certain cost, that you will be sucked in to keep continuing adding to the costs in the hope that it will gain its value again?
Yeah. It's a difficult question, and it's a difficult decision point. But the more you do it, the more easy it will be. What we also see is that some some projects are stopped just to see if the value is really coming in, because we can still maybe develop something later, but we don't have enough results or return for the moment. So maybe we stop today and we try something, or we see what happens. That's also a possibility, to pause something. Because your teams are there and you have projects. I mean, every organization has 300 projects running on something. So we know that there's work to do. So if you pause something, that's all right. You can work on something else for a while. So that may be a possibility. So Luc is confident. He goes to Marie. He asks Marie, okay, oh, sorry, I have to do my dun, dun, dun. All right, Marie, you can choose. I have two plans for you. I have one big IT black box, and I have my iterative development plan with Paul. What do you choose? Who are the Maries in the audience? Hands up. Okay, what do you choose?
That's risk.
Yes. Thanks. All right. Marie likes it. Of course, she has more questions. First question. I like fixed scope projects. Okay, what is a fixed scope? It's like you know, we define something in advance, we want to write something, and we want to build what is written. Can we still work with fixed scope projects? In fact, a backlog is not really that different than a fixed scope, except for two things, right? You need to respond to change because you talk to Carl at every iteration. Maybe Carl will say, "Ooh, I need something else," or "I need another variant of something." So we need to be able to add flexibility to our backlog. And two, we will not write or describe or analyze the features that are in the bottom half of the backlog. This is time that we do not want to waste. Yeah? We will fix our efforts in the first half of the backlog and not in the bottom features. We don't want to write them down like we probably would do in a waterfall development where we do analysis and things like that. So we don't do that because we want to be able to be flexible and see what comes out of the results with Carl. So those are the two main differences that we do. So if you have, for example, a project that is running now where everything was analyzed and where you have really big documents where that needs to be developed, maybe you can try the user story mapping tool and try to break it down in features and try to bring it into a backlog instead of having a Word document. Break it down in features and use this to be able to prioritize your features into a backlog. It's a really nice exercise to do. Second question Marie has is, what about fixed time and project deadlines? Well, we already talked about that before. My advice here is to use the story map. So use story map and backlogs to be able to work with deadlines. So we talked about this before, but the most important thing is to build something really fast. Ensure that the first things, so the risky things, the difficult things, that those things are built first and that you can deliver them as fast as possible. So I tend to go live with a project way beyond the deadline. I try to go live with something really small as soon as possible so that every time I can deliver something, a little green block on top of the other, because every time you can learn and you can also deploy something. So go live as fast as possible with your first line here of the user story mapping, which could be the MVP or whatever we want to call it. And then once you're live, you can build on top and you can start continuing building incrementally on your live budget and until you reach your scope or until you reach your budget. What about fixed budgets? Of course, Marie, she wants to know about the budget. Well, if your priority is correct in your backlog, you know how much your team costs. That means that you know how much iterations you can build with a fixed budget. Yeah? So the only thing you need to do is ensure that everything that is above your budget limit is something you really want to build, and that the nice to haves are down in your backlog. That's it. That's your budget limitation in your backlog there. It's really easy to manage. Of course, we will have flexible things here coming from Carl, but that's also a discussion you need to have with Marie and with Paul. Is the value against the cost still there? but your budget limit is really easy to fix in a backlog. It's your team costs against the number of iterations you have. What if we don't have the right skills in the teams? That happens a lot if you use maybe new technology or things like that. In fact, here, remember the prioritization of the backlog. We said the first, the risky things, the difficult things, and the things where you can learn. We need to do that first because you can then have a learning curve during your project while your risks and your value is going up. Your risk is going down and your risk and your value is going up. So we have a few techniques coming from Kanban, mostly. The WIP limits is something that, I don't know if you're familiar with WIP limits, but it's just something that we can use so that people can work together. WIP limits, very interesting to use. Also, bring in experts into your team. I will talk about this in the next slide, I think, and leave room for learning in your planning. So this is the expert thing. So if you want learnings, stop hiring scope. So don't go externally and give your project to another firm, but hire experts, bring them into your teams and bring them into your organizations so that they can help your team grow and help your team learn. So it's really very interesting to bring in the expertise into your teams instead of going outside and having somebody else write your code. Okay, Marie is hard on the facts, soft on the people. I like this quote. She asks about metrics. So how do you follow this up? Actually, you only need one metric in those kind of things. I know maybe you're using some kind of tools like Jira or whatever, where they have a lot of metrics. Actually, I don't use most of them. I only use one. So what you need to track is the start date and the end date of a feature. So whenever something is coming into the backlog and when something is delivered. The feature, the story, or the epic, you want to measure the three of them or the level, I don't mind, but those are the only things you need to measure, start and end date of something that's start and delivered. What can you do with that? And that's the only graphic I'm using. It's the cumulative flow diagram, because you measure here the value that is delivered. So those might be story points, or I don't know what you want to use, or maybe costs or value points, and the time that it takes to be delivered. So here you see that the blue dots are all the features that are delivered. So over time, we deliver more and more value. And the red are the things that are in development. So here you can see the amount of work in progress at the point in time. For example, this is the 1st of April. We see that we have 50 points in progress. Yeah? On the other side of the flow, you see the amount of time that is needed for something to be delivered. For example, we can start here 1st of February, this is end of May, this is the value we can deliver during this period. So this is really interesting to see how fast something is going to the customer or to go live or whatever. Yeah. So cumulative flow. If you work in Scrum, this is what a cumulative flow diagram looks like. We start, we want to build a lot of value, and we end the iteration, hopefully with everything that was in the backlog, in the Scrum backlog. We deliver everything. So we go down here, then we go up and we go down, we go up and then we go down. This is a control mechanism that you can build into your project. If you work in Kanban, this is how it should look like, because everything, Kanban is about speed. So everything that is in progress should be delivered as fast as possible. So you can use this metric to see if it goes really fast. If it goes up, if the red lines goes up, that means there is a lot of value in development and it takes too long to be delivered. So it's a really interesting instrument to be using in your project. What are the points that you need to look at? The points that take too long, too much value, or too long to be delivered. Those are the points that you need to look at. So if you're a product owner or if you're Paul or Marie, you need to go into the flow diagram here and see, okay, what is this point here? Why is it already that long into development? Or why is it, maybe it's too big, break it down or something like that. You can really have a look at the points in the flow here. Okay, what about velocity and burn downs? Leave it to Agnes. They know what to do with it. It's not a management instrument. So the key takeaways. How do I budget my project? Stop trying estimating what you want to do. Okay, this is really something I want to stress. Just estimate your costs, of your team and your tools and your learnings. And with this cost, do the right thing at the right time. So don't estimate projects anymore. You have teams, let them build the things at the right time with your backlog and your flexibility. This is what you need to start doing. Stop estimating whatever you're trying to estimate. It's not going to be right anyway. So you can use this and you can see, okay, this is my budget. This is my budget forecast. If we work for 4 iterations, I know how many my team costs and I know how many my budget will be in 4 weeks. That's very easy. You can do this for a year. You can do this for 6 months. You know how many teams you have. If you need more teams, then you just add it to your budget. Right, so my question is, how many projects are currently started in your organization? Does anybody know? Maybe some guesses here. How many projects do you have? 20? Okay, so that's your work in progress. If your teams, are your teams stable enough to be able to tell you when they will deliver something? That's also very, very interesting. I'm guessing no. Okay. Then the third question is, what are the crucial projects that you really need to start? This is your priorities. So stop starting and start finishing. There are a lot of projects going on, but you need to start finishing. And how do you finish? How do you stop a project? It's just by measuring the speed and the value, and by taking a decision at the end of an iteration, does this still brings value against the cost that we are putting into? That's it. So stop starting and start finishing. Right? Do not try to estimate. Sure.
In a situation where you need the business case to get approval to progress, how do you apply this concept without rocking the boat?
I will come back maybe to this question in a few minutes, because I have 2 more slides, and then we can bring it into the Q&A. So, where am I? Yeah, stop starting. Do not try to estimate what you're planning to do, right? But measure the number of teams you have and the cost, the learnings, the tools you need. This is your budget. Play with that budget and make sure to do the right thing at the right time with this cost. That's it. It's not more difficult than that. With this team, you have the skills, you have the costs already, they're budgeted. So start doing the right things with these teams. And now for the big picture, this is my last slide. This is all the concepts I talked about in this presentation. And it's not a scaled agile model, please. Okay. So for the end, start finishing. So thank you. I'm sure we have time for some questions. I don't know if I was fast or not, but perfect. So you had a question online, Philip.
Yes, so in a situation where you need the business case to get approval to progress, how do you apply this concept without rocking the boat?
Okay, so I'll try to translate the question. So if you're in an organization where a business case is necessary to start up something, how do you use this?
Introduce a different way of thinking.
Without having to change all the organizational rules and things like that. Is that correct?
I don't question, what if you need approval to hire a team?
Okay, yeah. So what I've seen happening, and what is probably the most easy thing to do, is to cover it up as a pilot or something. Pilots always work, and you will always find a manager that will help you finance a pilot, because it's something new and the rules don't apply for the pilot and things like that. So try to find something like that. And it's a bit bending the rules, but the pilots work. And once you can show the benefit of a pilot using new tools, using new techniques, then it starts interesting, and then the real work will start. And then you will need your manager that financed your pilot to be able to bring it higher up and to say, okay, we will start something new. You really need this approval to do that like this. If you need to hire a team, I'm guessing then, is it an external team because you don't have it in the organization? Then I guess it's a budgeting question. What value do you need to be able to prove that you have a case? And then I would start again with a prototype and hire something small. If you need a small team, if you have a small team, or maybe 2 or 3 consultants to start with, just start with a small budget and try to do a very, very small prototype just to prove a case, to show something very technical or maybe something very valuable that your customers will really like. Do some A/B testing or whatever, but do it small. Try to bring in small budgets. Small budgets will be more easily approved than if you need to hire an entire team and say we will need them for 10 iterations, then it's probably going to be much more difficult. Yeah. Yes.
I have a lot of questions, but that's the most important one. So I heard you say, don't work with estimations. I have some questions about this. Like, if you don't know the thresholds of when a functional minimal thing for your customer, where it is, and it looks really dangerous to not do any estimations at all. Especially if you start with the risky things like you advised. Most projects that I worked on, I know afterwards that it took months just to fix the first or the most risky challenges. So I don't see where it was possible in those cases to make the first step within the 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And if you don't know this in advance, you might get stuck in investing in something that never gets in a first functional thing with the customer.
Yeah. I think you just answered your question yourself. If you don't know, if you're investing for 3 months or 4 months, then it's probably just too complex. It's probably just too difficult. Yeah, if you're technically building something that is required or that is taking 4 months with a whole team to build, then either it's a very big product and you have a very good vision why you want this, and then your investment question will be very clear. We want this, so we need to go on. Or it's just too complex and it's just too difficult, and you need to break it down into something that is really smaller to be able to prove the value. So and one more thing is that if I'm saying stop estimating, I'm talking about the projects at the start of a project. We need estimations and the features, of course, and to be able to estimate your value and your deliveries and your iterations. We will estimate the features and maybe with value points or whatever to be able to do the planning. But it's about the projects. Like if we have a big document with 200 pages, and then we start to estimate how much it will cost, don't do that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Does this help or?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I have to let it sink.
I know that some features, especially the most technical things are sometimes really difficult to show the value of that. And in a demo, for example, what do you show if you're doing backend things all the time? Or if you do a really difficult algorithm or something? But still there, if it's too complex to explain, then your manager will not buy it. So you need to find a way to break it down and to show something that you can deliver value with.
Okay. And if it's okay, I have another question.
Are you a colleague or are you his manager? Okay.
I think some kind of analysis in advance could be really valuable. Like looking at competitors first, looking at the strategic fit with your company, doing some basic ballpark economics, like we know we're going to have these costs on the team, and what is the potential of scalability of income, what can come in.
Yeah.
I think you need a very high level business case, in my opinion, before you start with a prototype.
Did you do that before on projects before, high level business?
Well, it's my job.
Okay.
I'm the innovation manager, so.
So let me ask you, how many times, once the project started, how many times did we use those documents that you wrote? And for what?
Always, because I use them as experiments, hypothesis.
Yeah.
And then I always try to do an experiment on the assumptions we make, and always check them, and of course we adjust them a lot.
Yeah. So you have your answer. So if you need it, this might be actually even your prototype. Just to say, I want to do a small analysis, check the market, and go to Marie and say, I want to work 2 weeks on that. Does it have value? Does it have potential? Do you want to invest in it? It could be the start of a project.
It's not, because I understood that the prototype had to be like a functional working software.
I like it to be like this, because then you have something tangible.
In an ideal world.
Yeah. And I don't do analysis anymore. I just follow my gut, you know. I want to build something, and then you fail because not because you didn't do a good analysis. You fail because something technical happens, your customer doesn't like it, the market is not ready, whatever. But those kind of documents for me are not really valuable, but maybe for your project and your environment, they are really valuable, and they will help Marie to go into the investment phase. That's an important one. If that's the case, then you should do them.
I think it supports everything, but what you're telling is the most missing part in the most environments. It's totally valuable.
Yeah, thanks. You should get the mic before you speak.
So you really talked about how to convince Marie in buying in and doing this iterative or creating a pilot. How do you convince Agnes? If they're coming up with, oh no, this is going to take, we're working on existing products, and if you often get a story, no, if you want to change something on that, we'll first have to have a technical rebuild or refactoring of 4 sprints before we can actually start adding some value.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that?
Yeah, technical debt is sometimes really difficult. In my experience, actually, Agnes is the most easy part to convince, because if you have developers or testers or people working on the Agile teams, they don't like to go into big, long development things. They want fresh things. And if you can say, okay, let's stop for a while and say, we try 1 iteration for 1 week, like a pilot. You say, we do something new, and we try something. You can choose what we built from the scope document you have, maybe, or from the backlogs you use. You choose what we built, and we try to do it in 1 week in a different way. Or we start with the user story map, and you choose a few features, and then we built that, and we try it with an iteration. And just see the results, but use the retrospective meetings as well, just to capture how they liked it. And then you start adapting. But once they're in those kind of iteration phases, people really like to see results, so they're really motivated to continue with that. That's my opinion. And it's really true that technical debts are the most difficult part, because you don't have anything to show to the business, and it takes a lot of time to rebuild things and refactor things. And even there, I would really recommend to try to show, do the same value and cost calculations, and show really the impact that technical debt would have if you don't do anything. So it's not easy, but try to do it. Yeah.
Have to give it a try.
Yeah, sure, and get some help. Get people like Philip or people that did it before, that can also talk to Marie's and to business, just to to share experiences and things like that. That's really interesting.
More importantly, how do you convince the client of this approach?
You don't have to. The client.
Yes, you have to, because the client comes to you.
Yeah.
He has a specific question. He wants you to build something. And he wants to know what the budget will be. That's what the client
budget-wise. Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
he wants to know, what can you make it?
Yeah.
How fast can you make it? How much will it cost me?
Yeah.
How do you convince your client of this approach?
Well, you ask Paul, and Paul said that's not the right question.
Yeah, but
You
still,
say- you say-
the decision making
Yeah,
of my client is not based on this story.
No,
It's
I know.
based on how much it will cost them.
So you ask him to come back within 1 week or 2 weeks. Are you ready to invest into your prototype with him? Or maybe he will invest in a prototype. Ask him to come back and show him what you can do.
Then that leads me to my follow-up question. One of the first things that you said was start with the most complex thing first. Having the most complex thing first usually requires that you have a lot of foundation first.
You mean
How
technical
do you make
foundation? or-
something that is complex enough to convince your client without all the overhead?
Let's take an example. I'm building a website, and in the website I have a very different algorithm, difficult algorithm to do something on one of the pages. Yeah? What we normally would do is say, okay, we make a fancy first page so that they're very attracted and they like what they see. Yeah? What I'm saying here is that, okay, you build the algorithm first, and you don't need the technical depth or whatever databases, all things that you might need later, but you just need to break it down to the algorithm that you want to test. And you build that and you show the result to your customer. And then you say, okay, we can do this. Maybe you will have to wipe it away and do it again, but you proved to your customer that you can do it and that you're valuable and that you're worthwhile investing into. And another thing on that is that choose your customers. If your customer doesn't want to work in this way and you want to do it, I would not recommend going with this customer in this project, because you will, every time you will ask him to come for an iteration or a demo or something like that, he said, I don't have time, I don't want to do it, and blah, blah, blah. And then you don't have the customer validation at every point. So don't work with customers that work in a different way. That's very important, I think. Choose.
Of course, our customers already close to this approach.
It's difficult, I know.
Very difficult,
Yeah.
and we tend to arrive at situations where they come up with the fact that they don't have any money left, and they are at a situation where the product is not valuable enough to make money out of it.
Yeah.
That's something that occurred quite recently, and that's a big risk.
It is. And then the question is either the features or the prioritization was difficult at the start. Sometimes it's that, because sometimes we tend to build a lot of nice to haves also into the first iterations, just to be able to show something, you know, and that's really difficult. Or the customer is not prepared to invest anymore because he doesn't see the value of it. And if he does see the value of it, maybe he will find some budgets and some money. So, but that's difficult. That's a customer decision, of course.
I'm going to sneak in a few online
Yes.
questions and remarks. There are two questions around how and where to apply this exactly. So one is, suppose you want to invest in an ERP, how does it apply? I read between the lines, this is a big investment. We need to buy it as a whole. We can't buy just a small portion of the ERP. And related, is there a difference in applying this where you are self-building something or buying something off the shelf?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's related indeed. If you need to buy something, if it's a big ERP system or if it's something small, it's the same principle actually. First, of course, if you need to buy software like an ERP system, you don't have you don't have many choices. You need to go see vendors and you need to go figure out what is in the market. But those kind of things are always come with an implementation. You don't put in an ERP system just in your like SAP or whatever. You don't put it in your organization like this. You need an entire implementation with that. This is where this comes in. So once you make your choice, you can start talking to the people you work with to work like this. What is priority number one? What do we need? What are the small features that we need first? What is the most risky part? Especially with ERP systems, we tend to start with the easy parts, the selling modules, instead of going really down into maybe the, how do you say, bookkeeping? The accounting, thank you. Where the tricky parts go on. So that's maybe something you can use, like a story map when the implementation starts, just to figure out how to do your implementation delivery. Building something or buying something, that's another question. The build or buy strategy is really different. But I don't know, if you want to buy something small, you can still start maybe with the most valuable thing and try to figure out what you really need, and maybe try to find vendors that want to work in the same way. That would be applicable, like the customers you need to choose. Maybe find vendors that want to work in an agile way as well.
And I might add that if you are willing to risk a lot of money by buying something big immediately, that's a fair choice, just maybe the conscious choice. If you're not willing to take that risk, buy something small that you can use as a kind of tryout to learn whether the big thing would work or not.
Yeah. A lot of those ERP vendors, they offer smaller packages just to try it out, but there, choose the difficult one. Do not choose the easy one like the website part or whatever. Choose the core module just to test if it's really something that you can use, I would say.
And I think with the move to more and more cloud-based and subscription-based software applications, it becomes much easier, much safer to do these kinds of small-scale tests. There was a question also related to your question or a remark. Often there is an IT foundation or architectural foundation needed. Changing or building such an architecture may take time and cost much before delivering any valuable solution. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, that's very true, first of all. And second of all, a valuable solution is not always something that is visible or tangible. A valuable solution is something that will work for your customers, for your employees, but that is stable and that is worthwhile investing into the technical depth or the technical difficulties. So if you are able to show also something that will work for a few months, years, and that you can convince that the value is there, that is also very important to do. So it's not always something like a green little block on top or an app update or whatever, but it's also really something technically difficult that we need to invest in. And the question you might want to add to Marie at that point of time is, what is the impact if we don't do it? That's a very valuable question at that point of time. If you want to go into a refactoring for a few iterations, always ask yourself, what's the price if we don't do it? And the price is probably much higher than if you don't tackle it. So that would be a question I would add at the iterations.
Maybe a final on-site question.
Maybe still a question about more development teams themselves. So you take first the most difficult and most risky parts. So if you have an eager team, they're willing to do it. But what if so the first sprints will always be the difficult, more difficult, and then it'll get easier. But they're also the hardest. What if you have like 2 or 3 failed projects? You start another one again with the most risky, most difficult things first. How do you keep them motivated to still keep going? Because maybe after 2 or 3 projects, you will have some backlash or some fallout from your teams, and you will have it more difficult to keep them motivated.
Yeah, and why are the projects not working? Why are they failing? because it's too
Well,
difficult?
no,
Or
because you took the first most difficult things or most risky things, and you said we'll stop this project because it's not worth enough anymore. It's not valuable enough towards the costs.
okay,
So we'll stop the project and we'll start something new because we're always projects. But that means that you have to start again with the most difficult and most risky things.
Yeah.
So then the teams will also have to keep going for the hardest things first, and that may be demotivating for them. So how do you keep them motivating? In the first
I think we should ask the questions to the team at that point in time if they really feel that it's frustrating because we're not getting anywhere and the projects are failing and so on. Then maybe we need to ask them what they need to be able to be motivated. This is more a people question. I would say that every time a project failed, they learned a lot. That means that the knowledge is growing, and I would probably think that maybe the third time or the fourth time the project will succeed because they learn a lot and because they have a lot of experience, they work together and things like that. Of course, even in running projects, this happens as well. If you're a development team and you're working for a year on a project and you work in the iterations of 2 weeks, you get tired, you get backlash. You always get the same questions from your Scrum Master. What did you do yesterday? What will you do tomorrow? Or what was it in the retrospective things? And so you get tired. That's normal. And I think you need a good product owner and a good Scrum Master to be able to hold your team together and get them motivated. Buy them beers and pizzas and do some things. I'm not joking. It really works. It's a team thing at this point in time. It's not a project thing anymore. It's a people thing. Everything stands or fails with the teams. And if you need to invest in your teams, invest in your learnings here, invest in happy teams here. That's really the key. And if you see that projects are failing, maybe get some experts in to get the knowledge higher or something.
Okay, thank you all for your questions. I give the microphone to Nicolas to give the final words.
Yes, thank you very much. I think he deserves an applause. You can stay here. We still have a little present from one of our neighbors.
Ah, okay.
I don't know if you know, but the brewery of Brussels is next door.
I saw it
So we went
on the
there
way
and
here.
we took some presents for you.
Thank you.
And hand it over now.
Thank you very much.
This is the Straffe Hendrik.
All right.
It's a limited edition, so a numbered bottle.
Oh,
And this is the traditional Brussels. So
great.
from Bruges.
Thank
And
you very
I
much.
have a little certificate of appreciation for being here and at our company.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. For the people at home as well, thank you very much. We still have some time for networking, have another beer or another bread or whatever. And thank you very much and safe home. Thank you. Oh, one final remark on Philip.
I also like to end with a little bit of promotion. First of all, also thank you also for the technology to help us survive today. It's always good if technology comes back. This is one of the events that IIBA Brussels chapter organizes. We are trying to organize something about monthly. So do check out our website, brussels.iiba.org, for other events. If you would like to volunteer, because we are a volunteer organization, also Anna Nicolas support the team as a volunteer to organize these kinds of events and do other things, feel free to get in touch. Every little bit of help is useful. And the next event is Friday. On top of the regular events, we have also a weekly online BA cafe where everyone, also non-BAs, are welcome to chat about business analysis and completely different random things. It's just a 1 hour fun conversation to stay in touch with the community. So every Friday at lunchtime, you can bring your sandwiches and your beer. And then the proper event, the next proper event is in May 22nd and 23rd, where a couple of people that are here will be giving a presentation at our annual conference. So there is, when you get a beer, there is also a barcode. You can only get a beer if you scan the barcode, the QR code. So do check out our website to see if you are interested in joining us next month. Thank you very much. And also for people online, feel free to keep chatting online. The call is staying open for a while.